Hello. We had a blizzard here. I wonder if it snowed where you are. If it did, I hope you stayed warm and maybe you got out in the snow. I like the snow. I grew up in a snowy place, and also I feel like during the pandemic when it snows, it's like, oh, something different happened. So I'm here in my thermals and my scarf to read another section of No One Is Talking About This. And we're still in the portal. And in case you didn't catch it in the first video, the first half of this novel, so we have still a ways to go, is like this. It's this kind of scattered comic commentary on the internet and contemporary culture. And then the second part really changes and is much more of a conventional novel, but I don't want to say more until we get there. So I'll just continue along. All right. At least twice a week, she was forced to picture that terrible thing, a baby Hitler, the grimy black and white rolls of his armpits, either in the nude or cloth diapered, either with a mustache or without, either riding in a little gray tank or bedded down in a bunker with another baby wearing a blonde wig. Then someone climbing into a black phone booth and rushing on a black comet backward to him, then a slash or a neck snapping, or the dotted line and then the blam of a bullet. Then the smear of red icing all over the marzipan of baby Hitler, and the future doesn't happen, as easy as that. The numbers go back where they belong. The stripes slip back into the solid, the pounds fly back on bodies. The potatoes return to normal meals. But where does all the free-floating red feeling go, the cloud among the people that floated him up to the balcony when he first began to speak? Not my America, a perfectly nice woman posted, and for some reason she responded. Damn, I agree. We didn't trap George Washington's head in a quarter for this. A month after the election, she had been banned from the portal for 48 hours for posting a picture of herself crouched down and having her period on a small sculpture of twisted brown pipe cleaners that was labeled the Tree of Liberty. Wouldn't that mean you were the tyrant in this scenario, her husband asked, but she told him not to quibble. After her account was restored, she had decided to take a rest from political commentary for a while. Not because she had gotten in trouble, but because she had made her position clear, and also it had taken like 3 days to get a good shot of the period in motion. Every time she passed the model train store, she clenched her fists and said, "You did this." And it was true, it was true. Life as we know it was coming to an end because 160 years ago or whatever, some old weirdo who was obsessed with trains had to invent trains because trains didn't exist yet. Choo choo, motherfucker, are you happy now? The only thing that bound us together was this belief that in every other country they eat unspeakable food, worship gods more see-through than glass, string together only the most meaningless syllables like goo, 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 are warlike but not noble, do not help the dead cross in the proper boats, do not send the correct incense up to the wide blue nostrils, crawl with whatever crawls, do not love their children, not the way we do, bear the most tempting body parts and cover the most mundane, cup their penises to protect them from supernatural forces, their poetry is piss, they do not respect the moon, slice the little faces of our familiars into the stew pot. Jet lag had a habit of turning her into her mother, a high school librarian with a quiet drinking problem. If only my mother had been a college librarian, she thought. Then I would have had a real shot at the right ideas. Stream of consciousness, she yelled on stage in Jamaica, where the water was the color of a nude aquamarine. Though maybe not for long, she thought darkly, stream of consciousness was long ago conquered by a man who wanted his wife to fart all over him. But what about the stream of a consciousness that is not entirely your own? One that you participate in, but that also acts upon you. One audience member yawned, then another. Long before the current vectors came into being, they had been a contagious species. As the albino Joey was lowered into her arms at the wildlife rescue in Melbourne, she experienced a pang of distrust. Did people feel more connected to this particular kangaroo for white supremacist reasons, in the same way that they were more eager to adopt blue-eyed cats? Worth considering. Still, as she held him, she felt herself grow a deep elastic pocket at the center of her body, to smuggle something away from this continent where the moon traveled backward and the popsicles were known as golden gay times. America is very racist, yeah? The driver asked her on the way back to the city. Very, she said, and began to explain, but he held up a hand and shook his head. We see it here, he said, every day. The police are always killing those people, even when they only steal something small. She arrived an hour early for her interview at the BBC, hoping it would somehow reflect well on her country. Would you identify yourself As English? She asked the interviewer with great delicacy as he ushered her into the climate controlled studio, for she had never really understood who was supposed to be English and who wasn't. If someone held a gun to my head, I probably would, yeah, he replied, releasing a hot gust of air, lifting his chin with a look that was both resigned and defiant. She stepped back, alarmed. Had she committed a Brexit? It was so easy these days to accidentally commit a Brexit. She stepped forward again and awkwardly patted his arm. Well, don't worry, she said, because the only place that would ever happen to you is America. The cab drivers of other nations, in the last 5 minutes of her ride, would tell her that at least the dictator was stirring things up. Things are much better there already, one man told her encouragingly, as out the window the day descended flush into its corner like a 1 in a million screensaver. You know, I won $10,000 on that election. I saw what was going to happen. No one else did. So whatever was happening had made its way not just into the water, but into the seas. There was hope for the youth, though. On a European train, she sat in a compartment with a babyish Czech couple who were trying to climb into each other's eyes, hands, mouths. Every few minutes, the girl would pick up her boyfriend's wrist and kiss it as if she were eating the season's first strawberry, and then release a flood of tender and penetrating Czech directly into his face. Pink shame flamed in her cheeks, for not only had sex ended in America on November 8th, 2016, but English, that language of conquerors that broke rock and built with it, had never been capable of sounding that way, as if it were in the process of tumbling into its own long, open-legged ruin. Revolution, she thought, looking at them. Bring on the revolution, as they suddenly turned the sun of themselves on her and smiled. It should not be true that, walking the wet streets of international cities, she should suddenly detect the warm, the unmistakable, the broken to release the vast steam of human souls, the smell of Subway bread. That she should know it so instantly, that she should stop in her tracks, that she and her husband should turn to each other joyously and sing in harmony the words, "Eat fresh." No, it should not be true that modern life made us each a franchise owner of a Subway location of the mind. Downstairs at the hotel bar, a smooth Belgian couple who had always had good health insurance propositioned her for a threesome, but only after asking her who she voted for. Excuse me, I'm very sorry to ask. Surely we were the same, though, underneath it all. But no, in Provence, the man upstairs waited for her outside the bathroom, and when she opened the door, he poured himself into her mouth like a fountain, struck oil like a rain of coins. Whoa, she said in the voice of a horseback rider, her eyes slipping sideways with blonde wine and unexpected prairie modesty. But he panted 3 times like Christ, leaped at her again, and she thought, as centuries of divergence entered her in the form of a human tongue. Fuck it. I guess the French really are different. They know how to riot, for one. I almost feel like, as a man, I can't say anything, smiled the German teacher who had invited her to his class. 3 of his students were non-binary, and 1 was a transplant from Texas. So she kept imagining him with a lasso around his waist, soon to be a man and unable to say anything. In one sense, she was sympathetic to the teacher, whose hair looked like a Lego part. But in another, far more concrete sense, she had consumed an off-brand German 5-hour energy that morning, thinking, how much stronger could it be? The only possible response to that is, shut up, she told him, far more loudly than she had intended, and then wondered, good God, can caffeine be a metric? Oh no, there's the bell, he told her sadly, though she hadn't heard it ringing, and then frowned at her with the most unmistakable meaning. She had ended class everywhere, all over the world, and no one was allowed to learn anything anymore, especially not him, the teacher. The American ambassador to Finland, recently appointed by the dictator, took her on a tour of his residence. He was obsessed with Dante and had commissioned for his personal collection a custom chess set that featured historical figures from the Divine Comedy. I updated it, though, he informed her with the slightly horny self-satisfaction that all Republican grandpas displayed in such situations. I added one to the bad guys. See if you can spot him. It was Hitler. I added one to the good guys, too, he said, his face bursting with expectation like a presidential dog, and she looked down. It had to be, it was Ronald Reagan in a cowboy hat. What were we to do with the boys? What were we to do with the boys? The boys. In the Netherlands, she met a man who was now a Marxist, but who had previously been a crypto-fascist indoctrinated on the dark web. Like all fascists, he was secretly submissive, and what he wished more than anything was to pick up a woman and hold her for as long as she would let him. He swung her up in one motion to demonstrate with shocking elegance and strength. He settled her around his hips and breathed a sigh of nearly cellular relief. You are happy? She asked, and he nodded beyond language, like a little child, and laid his damp head against her neck. Your hair is so soft, he murmured. Could you make my hair so soft, like you? The woman next to her on the plane was reading with that rapacious diffidence, that vacant avidity that characterized the reading of things in the portal. 25 facts you didn't know about Gone with the Wind. Number 25 was just malnourished horse. The Cairns must be holy, she thought when she visited, for the air around her was doubled, tripled, with remixed and humming life. Old robes and old bones swished past her on their way to cook fires. A mist of eyes looked up to mark the place of the sun in the sky, and the ruddy cows on the opposite hillside spoke to each other in words that were almost comprehensible. Life, death, I'm spilling over, green grass. They said all you needed to be remembered was one small stone piled on another. And wasn't that what we were doing in the portal? Small stone on small stone on small stone. In Dublin, every single woman looked like her mother. In Dublin, every single woman was her mother, maybe. They were mean in the way that she liked. They cooked stunning cream of vegetable soups. They looked at her and narrowed their eyes, as if she were one of the snakes St. Patrick had cast out, as if she had at long last come crawling back. I love you, she kept saying to them as she stepped out of their wool-reeking establishments. I love you, instead of goodbye. When she walked through the gates of St. Stephen's Green, the new book, The Communal Stream of Consciousness, began to flow toward the rigid bust of Joyce. The whole park was so wet it looked deep, like something you could dive into and end up on the other side. She took a picture with raindrops on the lens and she put it in the portal. And then, because whimsy still belonged to the person, she leaned forward and made a soft pooting sound in the statue's ear. That night in the hotel room, she and her husband climbed in on opposite sides of the bed, and suddenly their marriage leaped through a mirror. His face was too large, their lips felt like other people's lips. When he tried to lift his right arm to touch her, he lifted his left instead. No, he shrieked after a minute. Go back, right side, right side, right side. At the Archaeological Museum, they stepped from a room full of airy beaten gold and into the tannic darkness where the bog bodies were. An informational plaque informed them that one particular bog body had its nipples cut off, since sucking a king's nipples was a sign of submission in ancient Ireland. A little boy stood weeping before the exhibit, his older brothers in a ring around him laughing. The bog body's first finger was raised as if to post. Dark brown nippleless torso twisted and twisted in the dark. It could never be king of anything now, except the crying little boy. What do you have to say about this? A woman in New Zealand demanded, presenting her with a folded and clearly cherished clipping from the Telegraph, in which it was reported that 1 in 8 young people had never seen a cow in real life. On the Isle of Skye, she and her husband ate langoustines at a restaurant overlooking a long gray ridge of rock with a lighthouse at the tip of it, and laughed at the herds of tourists who insisted on visiting lighthouses wherever they went. Some things, her husband whispered, are the same no matter where you go. But later, taking an afternoon out of the portal to read Virginia Woolf, she realized that that must have been it, the lighthouse the family sails to on the final page. Was that the final page? Or did the book end with herself and her husband cracking the red backs of little sweet creatures, cutouts of each other and all the same, and laughing at the people who moved in one wave, the family who went to the lighthouse? Your attention is holy, she told the class, as her phone buzzed uncontrollably in her back pocket. For a long ago joke she had made about a Florida politician who nearly died during elective taint lengthening surgery was receiving renewed attention that morning. It is the soul spending itself, she continued, closing her eyes to see something else, and described to them the remote monastery she had visited the year before. It overlooked sheets of fresh lavender like higher laundry, and opalescent slugs crept through the rain toward it on pilgrimage. And inside there was an underground room where the monks gathered every evening to study scripture in the silence. They sat in a circle in the cool scoop of the room, their baldnesses bowed together, and read. The floor sloped, seeming to pour toward one white prismatic corner that passed the world through itself like a perfect quartz spear. There was no reason it should look so solid, but it was where all that reading had gone. So that's the end of the section, and I like that section. I think it's a smart treatment of how politics, I guess, for saying a lack of a more nuanced word, works online, and so much of it is posturing, but then we recognize that it has real impacts and real consequences, and it's hard to tell the line from real politics and performative politics in this internet culture. So stay tuned for next time, stay warm, and I hope you are doing well, and thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.